Dawning, Great Rising, Cleveland, Ohio, and the rest of planet Earth. Welcome to 360 Info Network. Great show lined up for you today, and we will be joined momentarily by our brother Hamtonio. Just want to let you know what's going on at Larchmere Arts. We are not in session tonight, but next Friday, the 28th, we are going to be welcoming Gloria Cummings Jones, and she's bringing a fantastic trio of musicians to play some jazz for you. They are Elijah Gilmore, Ed Ridley, and Brad McGee. So you can come to Larchmere Arts next Friday, 7 o'clock p.m. is when it starts. You'll be able to pay at the door. There are going to be some adult beverages. There will be some snacks for you. And most importantly, live jazz. Don't miss it. Friday, 7 o'clock, 12726 Larchmere Boulevard, Larchmere Arts. It will be the place to be. We have a guest with us today that is coming to us all the way from the other side of the world. He's done something amazing. He has created a mural of 92 figures, 92 Black historical figures, people of African descent, and they are heroes and sheroes. He moved there from California, I believe. We're going to hear his story, and we're also going to see how it relates to our brother Hamtonio, because as you know, he just returned from Ghana recently, and I believe that's probably where he met this brother. And we're going to hear all about his story right now. So, with no further ado, we have with us brother Hamtonio, and we have brother Jerry Johnson. Hamtonio.
Yes. Yeah. Welcome to you all of you folks there. Yes. I actually met this good brother. I believe it was in 2018, maybe. It might have been 2018 where we met each other and had great conversations. And come to find out the brothers, is really down one of the super brothers that's know a lot of the people in my same circle, from Tony Browder to Finch to Maleficent, Santi, all these guys. This guy was a part of Aztec and everything else. So I was totally blown away and surprised. So we're going to hear his story, and I guess we're all firing on the same type of cylinder, and want to do some things for Ghana and to bring some information to us over here, on the other side of the pond, of what's going on over there in Ghana. So without that and further ado, let's bring in my good brother Jerry Johnson. What's up, brother? How you feeling?
Everything is beautiful. Welcome to Ghana, through the screen, that is. But good to see your face. I was thinking some of the names you were naming, some of these people I was even younger in the audience and just learning. So learning from them and seeing them around. Some I've had some short conversations with. But, all of these people have had great influence. You mentioned Tony Browder. I mean, when I think about the Browder Files, when I first read that, and of course, his work on Nile Valley Civilizations, which was so accessible to a lot of our young people. So even though I've met them here and there, I'm not close confidants with them, but I feel like they're my brothers through the work, and we certainly have taken advantage of the hard work and products that they have given us. So
absolutely, my good. Absolutely, brother Jerry. Now, explain to the audience how long you've been over there, and what made you look towards Ghana as your final. We're gonna call it one of your final destinations right
now. Well, I've been here since 2003 on a permanent or kind of semi-permanent in the first several years, but yeah, I've been living here quite a long time. I have, as I think I mentioned to you before, as you mentioned, I'm a product of the African studies revolution, if you will. 70s, 80s, and 90s, when we were reading our books, a lot of things were being published and made available. Of course, Sheikh Anta Diop was doing his work, Theophile Obenga, and just a lot of people. And you mentioned ASCAC and the rest. And so I was fortunate to be around and reading and in the study groups. I think the thing that got to me, though, but the thing that had the biggest impact on me was reading over again the philosophies and opinions of Marcus Garvey. And as I read different things and I thought about it, I kept coming back to Garvey because he seemed to me to have a very practical and thoughtful assessment of what African people needed to be doing and concentrating on for our time on this earth, trying to solve these problems. And as Jay Carruthers says, trying to get out of this mess that we are in. And so it was easy for me. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I said, so it was easy for me to make a decision to move to Africa after the early 90s, going to Senegal and a few other places in West Africa.
Mm-hmm.
It just made sense that Africa is where we have the land, the population, and the resources, and that if we do our work, we should be able to make something functional happen on this continent. You know, other places like the U.S., other places, we have a lot of conscious people. We never have as many as we'd like to have anywhere in the world. But it's the few things that we are kind of missing are the land, the population, and the resources. You know, we're not in control of the land. I remember Claude Anderson mentioning one time that I think we had 1% of the land after slavery, and we still have 1% of the land.
Well, right. Mm-hmm.
And then as far as the population, you know, we are whatever percentage of the population we are, but certainly not the majority. And the resources, whatever resources are in the country, especially if they're natural, physical, mineral resources, we absolutely have no access to nor idea where it even is. So some of these ingredients that are here in Africa, population, land, and the resources, give us the ingredients that we really need to build the nations that we have to build, rebuild the nations that we have to build. So it was kind of sensible in my way of seeing things to figure out how to get on this African continent and see where I could plug in and do the best work.
Seems as though your microphone is muted. Okay.
Yeah. It's funny that we all take most of us take on that particular type of mission. You know, of course, when people come, they may have different ideas about, and reasons why they may want to travel to Ghana like that. But in most of the conversations that I have with people such as yourself, you kind of want to bridge that gap, want to bring some type of assets to the continent, because, I really believe with all my heart that Africa is our new frontier and is Black folks in America's salvation. Just like, you was here over in this country about a gold rush, and everybody was running to California and what have you for the gold rush to try to stake a claim. So what I feel right now, the same type of thing is happening in Africa. If you just look at the trends of what's going on, you see other countries still trying to get a footprint in Africa. You can see that happening, and other corporations is trying to get in there as well. And then you see the recipe for the movement that's going on. While they're trying to kill the borders, the visas, they're trying to eliminate some of the visas so people can travel freely from country to country. The youth, you got the youngest population on the planet, and you got all the natural resources, and actually the youth is driving this particular movement and where we're at. We can't say enough about Ibrahim Traore up in Burkina Faso and the AES. We can't say enough about that's going on. So, Jerry, by you having boots on the ground over there, what is your assessment about where we at now versus from when you first came?
Well, there's two things in terms of the outsiders and the people, having stake in our continent. That's been going on a long, long time. This is not a new thing. I mean, maybe people like the Chinese are coming in a lot heavier now. But of course, we've been, minerally and resource-wise occupied territory for a long, long time, certainly since the late 1800s, when at the end of the Berlin Conference, when we were all split up and handed out to the different European powers. So that's been going on for a long time. But people like the Chinese and like Indians, and here in Ghana, Lebanese have been here for a long time. They've been investing and living and working and all of this for quite a while. We are behind. So that's one thing. Now, as far as the people in the U.S. Moving to places like Ghana or other places, I think you definitely have to come and you definitely have to check these places out. I say Ghana is just one country. Africa is a big place. I do like some of the movements going on. You mentioned Traore and the Alliance of Sahel states that's happening up there. We think that has a lot of potential. And from time to time, we get these kind of movements coming. And of course, if it begins to look as though these kind of movements are really going to result in a type of African sovereignty leading to independence and power, you can believe they're going to get a whole lot of outside attention. And I think it's just now starting. But be that as it may, these are still the solutions for African people worldwide that we have to look toward. So when you're in the U.S., in a certain kind of way, the best that you can hope for is you and your immediate family and maybe some people around you kind of escaping some of the traps. But in terms of building and really maintaining real power, like I said, some of the ingredients aren't there. That's not to say you don't do everything in the world you can do. But I mean, just realize where you have the advantages. I think that our young people in the U.S. are probably, and that's not just the African community, are probably going to have a much harder time, and they're showing having a harder time than their parents' generation, irrespective of race. So you can imagine if the majority of youngsters are, and I'm understanding there's a big phenomenon of Euro-American youth looking all around, leaving, looking for other places in the world to live. So, if they're seeing something grim, you can imagine what we must be looking at.
Jerry,
so I think we have to start considering, other options.
I have to ask this question since you spoke about young people, and we know that the population of Africa is largely young people. Based on what you just said, are there any opportunities for young African Americans in Ghana? Is there any way for them to bring their skill sets, their technical aptitude, or whatever foundation that they might have from an American-based education? Any opportunities for them in Ghana specifically?
Well, what I see is, our economies aren't developed the way they should be. And so if you're trying to come here and say, find a job, you're probably going to have quite a hard time, especially a job that's paying what you feel that you deserve based on your education, training, background, or whatever. But I'm finding a lot of young people are coming with these skills and they know how to make money remotely. They're designing, they're editing, they're doing all kinds of things, just amazing. And they are getting paid not just from the US, but from around the world, whoever wants to pay for those skills. So that's one avenue that I'm seeing. Now, of course, everyone doesn't have those kind of skills. And so we have to start thinking of other things that young people can do. It's one thing to come with a pension, like I have Social Security. Okay, I don't have these retirements and all of that. And I was in my early 40s when I came. And so I know what it's like to have to try to make it happen. But I probably had a little more going than some people in the U.S. in terms of what I could bring. But we're at the stage in history, unfortunately, where our economies aren't developed to where we can easily absorb people, pay them the kind of salaries they would like to have and this type of thing. So part of coming to Africa anywhere, you have to not try to replicate what you do or quote unquote have. And I say quote unquote have because we're we're not sure what you really have until they're ready to take it. But come with more of a sense of mission of what has to be built for the future. And so if you have that sense of mission, what has to be built for the future for your children, grandchildren, and all those, to have those kind of opportunities, then I think that'll make things a little more clear. But if you think you're just going to come and plug in and make the same money you were making over at IBM or wherever you were, that's not going to happen. So, but there's still a lot people can do. There's a lot of land here. There's people that are coming in. They're starting to get into farming. They're starting to get into, organic agriculture. People are getting into a lot of different things. And the people also, I'm finding, have a lot of training in terms of herbal medicine, in terms of holistic health. And a lot of those people are coming in and actually doing pretty good. I remember being surprised in the early 2000s when I came here, some of a few people who were doing chiropractic work, which I didn't know what the demand was. But I know a couple of people who did very, very well in that, and so there's just, you have to check it out, look around, see what you can do. But if you have the mindset that you just got to get the same salary and you got to have the same, then you're going to have trouble, because that's not enough of a mission to sustain yourself. You have to have a sense of mission along with hopefully some skills. I'm not talking about retirees now. I'm talking about younger people who have to make a career, make a living, feed their children, and make it happen. So a lot of it has to do with pure determination and consciousness.
Right.
Consciousness is pushing the way of what it is you want to do and what you're willing to, quote unquote, sacrifice. And the reason I say, quote unquote, sacrifice, because you'll find out in a certain kind of way, what you lose in material sacrifice, you gain in psychic relief, if you will. So
and that kind of leads me to my next question as well. I've always been on the mission of what can I do, and trying to bring something to the country and mend those relationships. And I also believe that there's a lot of growth that has to take place between the African American or as the brother Umar say, the African living in America and the African on the continent, as far as understanding, what has kept us divided and knowing the history, because we need to understand that the psychosis that was taking place on the continent as well during slavery and things of that nature, like you just talked about in 1884 with the Berlin Conference. And so that's to let you know that the colonizers was already there. And so, in bringing it up to date, we need to understand that a lot of the Africans was not taught their own history, there. And I talked to some people up Cape Coast Way about the slave castles. Is for a long time, the Africans living up there near the slave castles didn't know what the slave castles was, and was curious about the interests of African Americans going up there, because they didn't know, until recently what was going on. So how important, and this brings in the wall on what you're doing, and I think it's on the same page. How important is it for us to bridge that educational gap of understanding the history between the two of us on both sides of the pond?
Well, I think it's critical. Information is power, and information in the context of control of your environment is also power. So what I mean by that is, being here on the continent, these young people, when they get the information, and I have to stress, they need to get it young enough for it to be of strongest use for them, because as they get older, and I think I told you before, I spent some time around the colleges. By the time they get that age, they're thinking about a lot of things that don't have to do much with building Africa or even African pride and history and all of that. So you have to get them younger. But that education, that socialization, as I really like to call it, over there, in the U.S. and over here in Africa is critical on both sides, because it's really about knowing who you are. And when you know who you are, of course, you know your potential. Garvey said, what man has done, man can do. So whether you're a young child in Los Angeles, African child, or you're a young African child here in Ghana or Burkina or anywhere else, in Jamaica, knowing about African people going all the way back to our early civilizations, our resistance, our creativity, our brilliance, all of these things. Once you can imbue that into a youngster young enough, then he or she is going to grow with certain expectations. They're going to grow with expectations of power, of greatness. They're not going to accept domination as a normal thing, which so many of us do today. So what has happened in the socialization process here is just the flip side of the coin on what happened on the socialization process there. Both of them have been extremely disempowering. Now, what is our responsibility for turning that around? Now, if you think you're going to go to mainstream media productions and all of these places and convince them to change or to really begin to incorporate our stories and our history on any kind of realistic basis, you're obviously wasting your time, because it is not to their advantage to empower our youth with this self-knowledge and self-confidence. You know what I mean? That's I wouldn't do it if I were them. It is up to us to take control of that. Now, whether you're and so sometimes when I see them talking about taking certain things out of the school in the U.S., as much as I oppose that, of course, I mean, to the extent that we have anything useful in terms of African or American African history or whatever, of course I oppose that. But at the same time, what we really should be thinking about is how do we independently make sure these children get that confidence, get that information, and like I said, build those expectations for themselves to move around in the world as first-class people in the world. And that has to start early. There's nobody keeping you from bringing your children somewhere on a Saturday, or your neighbor's children, or your friend's children, and just saying, let's listen to these stories, or let's talk about these things, exposing them. There's nothing stopping us from doing that right there in every city and town in America. So if we wait for them to do that, we're in big trouble. Now in Africa, we got a similar situation. You would think that we would be, quote unquote, in control of this good curriculum, and we're going to get all this African. I have children that grew up here, and so I know the heavy British curriculum. You have to know about the London Fire of 1666. Most of the children who walk through that African ancestral wall, when I say most, I mean 99%, 99 point some percent, and this is after thousands of children now, have never heard of apartheid. So we're here in Ghana, and they've never heard of apartheid. They have no idea of what happened down there, who's got control, who controls the land, the money, politics. They don't have any. So here we are in Africa, and we don't know about some of the major things that have happened to us, with us on this African continent. So now there's no one stopping them from doing ancestral walls and weekends for their students, or even really forcing some of that into the curriculum. But now we're dealing with 3 or 4, 5 or 6 more generations of miseducation here on the African continent, to where a lot of the teachers and a lot of even the principals and all of these and directors of education, they don't really see the utility in all of that. They don't really see the use in all. What is that doing for the children? They want to know, how they're going to operate in a European or Asian dominated world. Well, when you're talking to your children about, you need to know all of their stuff and you don't need to know any of your stuff, you're already relegating them to second-class citizenry, second-class existence in the world. They have to know early on that they're first class, and everything that they learn should be empowering them to that end. So we got way too much. There's a Korean school that's just opened right down the street, way out here in Pram, big school, and it's their second school. And you go in there, they're teaching you Korean. You know what I mean? We got Indian school down the street from my children's school. They're teaching them Indian languages and culture. Okay, they got they have in China and other places, schools teaching African languages, Yoruba, this, that, and the other. And why are they doing that? Because they intend to be in a dominant position over you into the future. So your children have to understand this is what's going on, and you have to be preparing them for the threat and the onslaught of people to come who think they deserve, or even if they don't think they deserve it, they intend to take what it is you have. So are you insulating your children? Are you empowering them? Are you telling them you are supposed to stay in charge of this? Are you telling them don't let them do anything here on your land that you can't do in China, India, or any of these other places, Lebanon and the rest? And it's got to be a quid pro quo, but you have to respect yourself, know yourself, confidence in yourself, love your people, and have all of these things deeply imbued in you for you to be ready to meet that challenge. Oh, I'm sorry. And we absolutely are not doing that right now, but we can be. And some people are doing their best.
Yeah, and that's a shame, and I guess that's the problem we're facing right there. And see, and I think what you just said is very important for African Americans to understand that, because we be looking and questioning things, and why, and why Africans didn't come for us, or what's going on over there. I don't see the connection. You got to understand that the system was set up like that over there, and just think about the obliviousness of them not knowing what's going on in their own continent, and not understanding that plight, not understanding the Atlantic slave trade, and understanding the divisive mechanisms that is put in place to keep us apart. We have to understand that. So when you come over to Africa and may run into a situation to where people may not understand you and understand your plight, it'll give you a better sense of understanding how to deal with that, and understand what you need to be doing for those who want to come, what you need to be doing to mend that and bring that to close that particular gap. So as far as the wall is concerned, Jared, what kind of response you been getting from the wall, and how are you connecting to the children over there and teaching them their history?
Well, I see the picture you have there. That's like the first, not even the first, but 10 or 15 pictures, and there's 92. And so, as you can see there, Baba Issa Hilliard, Ya Santawa, Didan Kamati, Maurice Bishop, Edward Wilmot Blyden, Steve Biko, and some of the rest. And then it goes on. And the response has been great, because the children love to see themselves, in history. The children love it. It's like why hasn't anyone been doing this before? And but I think one thing about bridging this gap, because we talk about that a lot, and I think, we're crazy people, In other words, we've been socialized toward insanity on both sides. I mean, there's a flip side, and I know both sides well. We've lost so much. And that's why I'm back to talking about some of the younger people, because you see, let's just take my African Ancestral wall, and let's say that we had an identical thing in Los Angeles, an identical thing in Philly, and all of the rest of the places, New York, DC, and all the small towns, Jamaica, on and on. And I'm just saying identical for the sake of this argument, which is, let's say they learn all of that same identical history, and more, of course. Well, and they're young, and they grow up. You're not going to be able, if you come from Jamaica to Ghana, or if you come from Los Angeles to Nigeria, or Detroit to Kenya, and you grew up with that knowledge, no one has to tell you that this is your brother. No one has to tell you that, explain to you why there's contradictions and conflicts. Both of you already know, because you were grown up with the information. You were raised with the facts. You know the context. And so when you see another brother, all you think to yourself, if you're Ghanaian and you were properly socialized, all you see is another brother who, went through a hell of a ride, and you're glad he's back, and let's get to work. And when you come here from the U.S., you see a brother who has also went through a hell of a ride. And so when you see the problems we have with some of the difficulties, you know what happened. So you don't have to get into a judgment mode. You don't have to get in an argument mode. We're both leaving two insane asylums trying to make our way. You see, but if we grow up against that insanity, we grow up knowing that they're raising us in insanity, and we're smart enough to know this is an insane system and why we are as crazy as we are, then we have a chance to fight it. You see, so I think a lot of this, how do we get along with the African? How do they get? You're dealing with two groups of people who are seriously psychologically, intellectually, culturally damaged. And so I think sometimes we expect too much of each other.
Yes.
We can't, two crazy people meet in the middle of the road, they're going to do something crazy. That's just how it works, And so we gotta be working on the deep crazy process. And then when we get that under control, now we'll start seeing, some positive results. So I don't worry so much about how well do we get along. We first meet each other, they look at us like this, we look at them like that. That's all. What else could it possibly be? I mean, after what we've been through, of course, we're not going to look at each other the proper way. So some of these are symptoms of wars lost in the past. We got to win the wars today with our children's mind, and then we'll be ready to tackle the conflicts in the future. But there's a sense of urgency that I'm not sure that we are all acknowledging. And that sense of urgency is because the rest of the world needs Africa and needs Africa more than ever. Now, the good news is that more of our people, because of things like what you all are doing right here, are getting the message. More of our people are figuring it out. More of our people are decoding the game, and that's a beautiful thing. And you can see that progress over time. Like myself, having watched over the last 21 years, I have definitely seen a lot of progress in terms of what people know and think. So don't think that the studies and the things that we were doing in the 70s, the 80s was just all for naught, quote unquote woke or whatever they're talking about. These things have sunk into a lot of our people. You were mentioning Tony Browder, but I'm looking at, and Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark and, all of these people that have been working all of this time, Tony Martin, Marimba Ani, all these people, the work that they've been doing has been getting into people. And the fruits of those we are beginning to see, and then scholarship on this side. So I think things are going to get better, but we better be ready for a rough ride, because people around the world, from Chinese to American, do not. If you could look at their spreadsheets for the future, all of them are assuming the African asset is available. I'm telling you, if you can get inside, I suspect the Chinese 50-year plan of how they're going to develop and move and grow and work on an international basis, they're assuming our assets are available to them. No, let me say it differently. They're assuming our assets are available to some, not to us. So now the question is, the Africans aren't going to have it. Either we're going to get it, or the European going to get it, or the Indian, somebody. But they're all planning with our assets without us. And we got to stop. We got to look and raise our children to say, I don't know how y'all planning on your budgets and your long-term projections with these resources, because if they under this soil, we're going to control it by any means necessary. But if you haven't socialized your people for that, then that's not the results you're going to get.
Let me say one thing. That's my fear, and let me tell you what I mean by that's my fear. It's a movement. I don't know if you know, Jerry, or not. It's a movement over here about Vince, correct me if I'm wrong. It's something Aboriginal, foundational Americans, whatever. Brother.
Yeah, I'm aware.
Yeah, and so and my fear is that, now let me preface that a little bit, just a little bit. Of understanding, I understand we've been over here in America. I understand we built this country, on the sweat of our back. I understand that totally. You know, some of them has even went to the point of believing that America was Africa, and because we had Memphis here and Memphis there, and however, the point when I mentioned about being they're finding gold in California, and the rush was there. I'm trying to tell you what Jerry just eloquently said. The everything is set up there. We should be trying to to empower ourselves with the resources there. So what my fear is, this young 25 to 45 group who's talking this foundational stuff is going to actually just turn their back and let folks come in and do what you just said, Jerry, without even a fight. Let them sit up there and carve Africa out for themselves. And we're going to be sitting over there trying to make a stake in America that is already spiraling down, and probably be the divided United States when Trump get done. You know what I mean? And we're going to try to take possession of something that folks is almost ready to throw away. And they're going to let these other entities come into Africa and slice the pie up without even mumbling a word. They just go ahead and let them do it. You know what I mean? And we find out, and the motherland be the other land, and we find ourselves behind out again. That's my biggest fear.
Let me just cut in real quickly and remind the audience that you're listening to 360 Info Network right here on AM 1490 WERE. Our guest is Jerry Johnson, and he is the founder of creation in Pram Pram, Ghana. It is called the Ancestral Wall, and it features the images of 92 Africans, people of African descent, heroes and sheroes from around the planet, largely in America, largely in Africa, but you know who they are, and you will find out as we continue our discussion. Let me also remind you that you are listening via AM radio, but we are also live on Facebook and YouTube. You can go to our respective YouTube channels, Vince Robinson and The Journey with Hamtonio, and you can take advantage of the archives that we have on both of our platforms. So if you missed what you could have heard today, you can come back at a later point, listen to this program, and listen to other programs that we have done right here on AM 1490 WERE, and we will continue the discussion. Jerry, I wanted to just ask you, in light of the fact that you said that you have children, I'm assuming that you have children that perhaps were born there, or maybe you have children who were born in America and made that trip to Africa. I'm curious about how they processed living in Africa versus living in that country that some consider the greatest country on the planet. How did they adjust, or how do they feel about being in Africa as opposed to being in America?
Yeah, you're on mute, Jerry.
Okay. Well, my children were born and raised here, so
Okay.
they never lived in the U.S. before. My oldest daughter was born in Los Angeles, and she's visited here, but she's never lived here. So, yeah, they don't really have that much to compare it to, except for the few trips they've gone to Magic Mountain and all of that. So it all looked good. It all looked good to them because they just went and partied, But they've done well, and even if they do spend some time in the U.S. here in the future, they're teenagers. Hopefully, we grounded them well enough to know something about their responsibilities, and something about responsibility to the race, and in a selfish sense, responsibility to themselves and their own children and grandchildren, because we don't know how long things are going to stay together. But so, yeah, the children, of course, they sometimes they walk through the African Ancestral Wall and give the presentations themselves, so they know this history pretty strong, and hopefully them and the ones around them, we've been building their expectations for power and greatness in the world.
Well,
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Now, I was going to touch back on what brother was saying on the ADOS and the foundational, this, that, and the other, but I'll hit that in a moment, sir. Go ahead and
Yeah, I was just thinking about the fact that because your children have been raised in Africa, their perception of America could be similar to the perception of young Africans. And many young Africans want to come to America because they buy into that whole idea that it's a better place. Your children have the benefit of a father who is steeped in African American tradition, culture, understanding, awareness, Pan Africanism, and so forth and so on. So they get a different perspective of imperialism and the evils of American society. So it would be tragic to me to think that your children could come up with this pedigree and then have a desire to live in America like many young Africans do.
Well, you're underestimating the power of the media, underestimating the power of internet and all of these streamings and TikTok and everything. No, this thing has gripped the minds of children worldwide. You know, even inside America, you know, I see young people are depressed because you're on this side of Atlanta, and as far as you know, your buddies had a big party on the other side of Atlanta you weren't invited to. You know what I mean? So everybody, the grass looks greener on the other side, even to the people on the other side. You know what I'm saying? And so, no, I think that the media has an impact on them. I complain about this all the time, especially a lot of homework and things. They have to be online. Well, they're also have access to everything else online. So they can tell me a lot about what's going on in the U.S. and don't even talk about music and entertainment and all of those things. Sports, they know all of that. So, yeah, I like to think, you know, that I've tried to imbue these things deep down inside, but don't think they are impervious to what we would consider to be the frivolous, because they are not. Now, I think as time goes on, hopefully you put something in them that flowers later on, and they start looking at things after they see all of the whiz bang, and then they go, wait a minute, there's a whole lot. And then, you know, you drive off. I remember there was a sister from Senegal who was visiting when I was living in Los Angeles. And she'd been in Senegal all her life, and that's all they wanted to do is to get to the U.S. I mean, oh boy. And I remember one of the first days she had a little job, and she'd been there, and she got stranded. And so I was trying to help out because I knew her family back there. And I remember getting off the freeway in Los Angeles to take her to this place she was working, going to work with some people. And, you know, there's this white dude standing on the side of the road with a sign. It said, you know, homeless, you know, help me, please, you know, same old thing, white guy. And she was staring and staring at it like, what's going on here? And I said, well, the guy's homeless. She said, what's that? What do you mean? You know, so he doesn't have a place to stay. I mean, she was so discombobulated by me saying that. And she said, why didn't he just go home to his family? I said, well, it's not exactly like that. You know, but the point is, she couldn't imagine anything even remotely like that from where she grew up in Senegal. All they saw was Hollywood and good times. And I remember in Senegal at one time, you go there, the streets get quiet. Everybody wants to go off and see Beverly Hills 90210 or Dynasty, you know, and they're all watching this stuff. And so even people on this side of the water who we think we're trying to give all this information to are still highly susceptible to very slickly produced Western media. So it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge, even with my own children, because like I said, their homework requires internet. And once they get on internet, unless I'm just standing behind watching every click, you know, it's going to get away from it. You know?
So I want to follow that up and talk about the children's integration into that society, and also the integration of us expats, those of us who see fit to leave America and come to Africa and create a place to live. One of the things that has come up in conversations about repatriation is isolationism. So we leave America, we come to Ghana or other places, and then we create these communities that are just primarily us. And we exist within this, and we go out into the greater community, but we don't actually contribute anything. I'm just curious about the vision of your children down the road? When they see what they want to do in the future, is it being a meaningful contributor to what's going on in Ghana, or is it just, perpetuating a lifestyle that allows them to live there and live there successfully?
Or living in America, quote unquote, successfully.
That
You know
too.
what I mean? Same time. And this is this materialism that has got a chokehold on everybody. And I always think about Martin Luther King talking back there about militarism, racism, and materialism. And that materialism still has a chokehold on a lot of people. And we're at a double disadvantage because we began to internalize this material culture without the capacity to even produce the things that we materially want. So we're in big trouble. You know what I mean? If someone else is producing the things that you desire. So there's a lot going on there with the material culture. But I still think this is a question of how well we are socializing our children in the beginning and from youth. So and that's another thing about media too. I mean, people always talk about, oh, what can we do wherever we are? I don't tell people you got to move to Africa to do anything to move this ball forward. I'm saying you can have some higher leveraged activity in Africa just because the land resource and population are already here. But curriculum, stories, animation, all kind of things you can do, products you can put in play for young people in the African world that will help build up that same confidence and self-image to where they're not going to be, even if they like the bling, they're in their subconscious or in their conscious minds at that point. If I like the bling, I'll make the bling. Now, if someone says, well, if you're going to make the bling, that means you got to keep the resources in your ground, because the reason you're not making the bling, and when I say bling, I'm talking about cars and washing machines and everything else. Say nothing of things that require coltan, copper, high-tech items. If you want the bling, if you want that tech, that stuff's in your soil. So the first thing you have to do is stop letting that get out and processed by someone else and then sent back to you. But if you have a certain view of yourself, then that's a no-brainer. Well, we don't let that go out and be processed and sold to us for 100 times the cost, the price. You know what I mean? We're not going to allow that because we're not those kind of people. But you have to be socialized to believe that in the first place. If you're not, you're just susceptible to buying everybody's junk and sleeping and turning your head and pretending not to see, certainly not to fight, to keep the things in either in your ground, or if they come out of the ground, they're under your control. And this is a big part of it. So I don't even say, oh, the materialism, I don't believe that we should be too wrapped up in the materialism, but to the extent that we are, let us control it. Let them buy the processed goods from us. But the problem is, to get to that state, the people who are going to lose, be they Asian, European, or wherever else, are going to go to war with you to maintain that advantage. And that's the big thing. They are going to fight you tooth and nail before they let you have the advantage of your own resources. You understand? They're going to go to war with you. And so if you're not raised in a way that says, no, this is mine, this is divinely mine, if you will, or this is ancestral heritage, and you don't get it. Not only don't you get the resources, you don't get our minds. Not only don't you get the resources, we don't want your crap in our schools. Not only don't you get the resources, we are going to control the media, what is beautiful, what is not. So you go around and people are bleaching and all of that. That's all comes down to us being exposed to this Western media and have internalized, what is beautiful. And, and when I was growing up, I can remember being a kid, they used to talk about, Dorothy Dandridge and Lena Horne and all. So we've been dealing with this stuff for a long time. Here they're doing a lot of bleaching, but I remember Fela Kuti back in, I think it was the 70s, certainly the 80s, had an album called Yellow Fever, and that's what that was about, bleaching and trying to be. So all of these things, if these things are in our mind, we're on a losing course. So first and foremost, if we get control of the socialization of our children worldwide and have enough people involved in that process, Let me say that again. Have enough people involved in that process. And it doesn't matter where they are involved. They can be in the U.S. doing it. They can be anywhere doing it because we need it everywhere. Sometimes in the U.S., some of the production and some of the things might even be easier to produce and to offer to the African world. So you don't have to get up and go anywhere. I'm just saying a higher leverage activity, I think, is here on the continent. But we can work
so
through
would you
it.
say? Would you say, and that's kind of leads me to our next question now, because I've seen and there's always been movement. You know, we can go always all the way back because I think African Americans really don't know the role that they play in Black folks all over the planet. Folks would say from an economic standpoint that the African Americans have more wealth and control more stuff than any other group of Blacks anywhere on the planet. And also, if you go back into our leaders like Kwame and even I'm finding out that our good brother up in Burkina Faso has done some studying, and Marcus Garvey has done some study of some of the African Americans over here that they kind of like inspired them to do what they did, took back home to their countries and what have you. So I'm saying there's been African leaders who have mimicked, and appreciated some of the stuff that African Americans have done over here. But what I'm finding even more so, maybe in the last 10 years or so, this thing called this internet, it has made the world a little smaller. And I'm looking at all these podcast channels that are produced by Africans and young Africans who are getting the word out. And then on top of that, you got people like Arikana Charo and Piola Lumumba and Julius Malania over in South and several others that are speaking to large groups about what's going on. So this internet has played a role in just like the Black exploitations on stuff that you was talking about has been a bad role model that's been played to get into our socialization and our psyche. But now this internet seems like it's turning some things around. So what are your thoughts on?
Well, the internet is, like any other technology, right? It's a two-edged sword.
Right.
I mean, some of the people that you see a lot and say, oh, yeah, this person is great. That's because they'd rather you see them than some of the other people. I was just reminded that this African Stream, which was just a real shoestring bootstrap operation out of Kenya that was doing some good news and some good analysis, got kicked off all of the major platforms. And you say, well, why? And some of the other ones that don't get kicked off, and you wonder why. So the problem with certain technologies is who controls it? Who controls it? And especially with things, I'm looking at things like AI. If you look at AI, for instance, when they're generating all of this kinds of information based on everything on the internet, they're still sifting through what it is they're giving you. You understand?
Yeah.
And so at some point you can find yourself in a situation where you think you've got all of this information being churned up to give you a summation of this, that, and the other. And the people in control of these platforms and these systems begin to trim out and filter out a lot of the things that we really, really need to know. And I watch them do it on just all kind of different things. I mean, just for instance, I look at this whole Ukraine war business. Well, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of background that the people in the United States have no idea of that happened leading up to this Ukraine crisis, going all the way back into the late 90s and 2008, 2014, that the majority, and I can talk to 100 people in the U.S. and they won't know anything about it. Now, there are places on the internet where you can find out about it, but you're so overwhelmed with, the mainstream stuff. And I say mainstream, I mean mainstream on the internet, that a lot of times people don't get to it. So they even begin to filter out the information slowly. They don't have to do it overnight. And then when you put in your thing and let AI go find all the magic, there's going to be key ingredients missing, and they just shave them off a little at a time. The next thing you know, your story is distorted and generations have gone by and you've forgotten what was cut out. You understand? And your children have done 20 term papers, and some of the most important things of it are left. And I think that's like Wikipedia. You know, you look at Wikipedia, they give you some basic stuff. But then if you know about certain things, you're like, well, wow, this is a key piece of information that's left out of Wikipedia. But, you know, kids are writing book reports on it, not knowing that there's other sides to the story that they really need to know. So I'm saying all that to say is technology is very powerful. We're here talking now, but you have to understand these people are going to spend trillions trying to make sure that our children are still improperly socialized. And let me hit that point a little bit about our children, because it's extremely important that the powers outside of Africa socialize our children for the future. I don't know if you ever seen any of these demographic projections showing that, you know, the African youth, the cohort between, I forget what it is, like, you know, 16 and 30, or whatever it is, what they consider to be the youth cohort. Sub-Saharan Africans are going to be like half of that cohort before the end of the century. You know what that means? That means half of the young people in the world are going to be Black Sub-Saharan Africans. Okay, now couple that with the fact that our children are the most influential children in the world.
Okay, Brother Jerry, hold that thought, because we're going to go into overtime in just a few moments and we can develop that thought that you just had. I just want to take this opportunity to remind everyone that you are listening to 360 Info Network right here on AM 1490 WERE. Our guest is Jerry Johnson. He's the founder of the Ancestral Wall in Pram Pram, Ghana. It is a magnificent installation, and if you ever get across the pond, you owe it to yourself to get over there and witness that. Also want to take this opportunity to thank our engineer, Tone Harley, for facilitating this broadcast. And we've got somebody on the planet, on the other side of the world, Ghana, West Africa, on the air with us right now. We will continue this discussion on the other side live on our YouTube channel. As always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, make today your absolute best day. Peace, y'all.
Peace.
Power.
All right. We are live on YouTube and Facebook with Jerry Johnson, the creator of the Ancestral Wall. First of all, it is a work of art. You have 92 portraits that were painted. They are heroes and sheroes from Africa and the African diaspora. And I wanted to get a little bit into how this actually happened for the benefit of those who are watching us now. How was it that you were able to create this fantastic piece of art and history on the other side of the planet?
Well, basically, I said a little bit earlier, but, you know, having dealt with a lot of African students at the college age, I realized that there was really a lot missing in their, just like us in the U.S., in their history and in their information. You know, you can go through and get a bachelor's, master's, and all of that, all through high school too, and do well, and really not know anything about Africa and live in Africa. You know, and so I said, wait a minute, you know, we have this same problem in the U.S. And so what I started doing is going out to the schools, actually, in the rural areas out near New Ningo and Pram Pram, where I live in actually New Ningo, but New Ningo and Pram Pram are kind of mentioned together a lot of times, Ningo, Pram Pram. And I went to a lot of the schools out here and try to deal with the younger students, because it seems like, you know, try to get to them younger while they, you know, are still more open. And that got to be really challenging after some years, because, you know, these villages are remote, they're hard to get to, schools are noisy, all the rest of that. Then it came to me that, well, since I had the space, that I would just plaster this wall. Then I would have 7 artists. I found 7 artists to paint all of these Africans in history, ancestors in history, and then just bring them on field trips. And that's worked a lot better, because easier on me, first of all. But secondly, you know, when a child comes on a field trip, they just tend to, the the principal and nothing else, and the teachers are going to make sure they paid attention because they had to organize transportation and food and something else. All of it is free of charge in my end, but still, they still have to, expend some resources to get the children to come. And so that's worked out well because, as I was mentioning, thousands have come through, and time to time, you get a nice little reminder from children out somewhere. It just happened to me last week, in fact, that some years before that they've come through the wall, and I ask them who their favorites are, and you just be surprised at what children remember. And I want them remembering. Just the other little girl about 9, she was talking to me about what she remembers. She just saw me out in a store and got excited. She's still small, so she must have came when she was 7 or 6 or something. And they still have these things in their mind. Now, what we need is a way to water those seeds once we plant them, but at least we have to plant them, And so
I just came up with an idea, Jerry, and it's because I'm involved in murals and art, public art here in Cleveland, Ohio. If you had a QR code on each of those pieces that could lead to an extensive biographical treatment of their lives, it would add even more value to that. So young folks being attuned to technology, they could visit that installation, they could pull up that QR code, and they could read the history of the person that is depicted. Just a thought.
Well, and right now, since so many people have come by over the years, from the U.S., if you go on YouTube and just type in African Ancestral Wall, you'll find, different people who have video recorded as I walk through the wall and explain the characters on the wall. So that's something I always just any YouTube, just YouTube, put African Ancestral Wall, and a bunch of different ones will pop up. So you and your children or whoever it is, if you like. Beautiful. Yeah. Okay, that's my wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you
can find that anywhere, and I like that idea though. And people have given me different suggestions, and I've been either low tech or lazy. I'm not sure which, but we do definitely have a place where they can get the explanations.
Yeah. Well, that perhaps might be an assignment for your children.
Yeah.
Because we know that they're high tech.
Right.
Oh, they know. This is what the people just gave me. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Looks like you found yourself a Ghanaian wife.
Yeah, but some things are universal. She was just asking me for money. So I'm gonna tell the brothers, if you think you're gonna get away from that, I got that. Oh no, they're gonna track you down, brother.
Jerry, you was
international genetic thing here.
Right.
Anyway,
before we went to the break, I don't want you to go too far away from what you were saying, your thought about the internet and children and where we was at. If you can recover where you were going with that conversation about the internet and how.
Yeah, I was just saying I'm cautioning against. On one side we use it to the best we can, but we just have to be aware that the people who are in control of that backbone and control of those fiber optic cables running across oceans and control of those satellites downlinking all kinds of capacity to browse and do all your thing, are not us. So if it's beginning to look like, because we are talking a certain way and because we are propagating certain orientations toward, especially our young people, putting them in the pipeline, if they're thinking, which they are, they're going to go, it looks like that's a bad idea for these Africans to keep communicating the way they are, because they're beginning to convince each other that they shouldn't get screwed. You know what I mean? Can't have that because we all are relying on their land resources. And even to some extent, they're relying on our population, not just as markets, but it's also, they're always tapping into our brilliance. You know, don't underestimate the extent to which our brilliance are feeding their systems, whether it's technology, whether, and don't even mention, you know, popular culture. So there's a lot of things they have incentive to limit and control our access to these media, right?
Jared,
And if we're not controlling it, they can do it.
Yeah, just an example to what you just said, you know, about they would show you information, but leave out little certain maybe important things that that you need to know about that. I find it very interesting that on mainstream media or what's going on in West Africa, you don't see it over here in mainstream media at all. Am I right, Vince? You got to catch stuff about Burkina Faso and what's going on in AES. We got to catch it on the internet. You know, Rachel Maddow and all them on MSNBC and stuff. They're not talking about what this guy is doing. If anything, they're going to say something negative because of the military takeover on that. So they're going to feed on that, but they ain't going to turn around and say what. Because of this change, how has it benefited Burkina Faso? What are some of the stuff that he's doing there that may have justified booting somebody out of there who's been stealing all the resources? They're never going to, talk about that. And if they say something about it, they first say, well, it was taken over in a military coup, and bring in that negative connotations behind it. You know what I mean? So that is an example on what, of controlling the media. And actually people getting a different version or not a complete version on what's going on.
Well, I think it supports the notion that Gil Scott Heron invoked years ago when he said the revolution will not be televised. They're not going to show you what's going on in Burkina Faso because that's the revolution, and that's the most significant revolution because it undoes the shackles of colonialism on the continent of Africa, and it's a signal to those of us who are on the other side of the world to wake up and see what the possibilities are when we take control of our resources, our people, and our governments. It to me, it's just as simple as that. Jerry, what did you want?
The key to that is, though, the key all to that piece there is along with that information, letting folks know that the good that he's doing for the people. And like what Jerry was kind of alluding to, that people's not going to sit back and watch that, and letting people know that they don't try to kill the brother 20 times. So when you don't go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
Yeah, but don't be so appalled. That's what they're supposed to do. Well, no, I'm being a little sarcastic, but not totally. How are you going to keep control of all of that if you don't try to knock out the people who are changing the game?
Absolutely.
I mean, this half of that ancestral wall up there, not half, but a lot of people on that wall are those very Africans who are trying to bring this kind of sovereignty to their people in their states and areas. And the people are like, no, you look in the Congo today. It's just an example. The same thing is going on. All of those resources in the Congo, when Lumumba was there, they had to get him out of there because he was talking about how do we control some of that for our own benefit. Dial all the way up. And that was 1960. Now come all the way to today, 2025, and it's the exact same discussion, the exact same motivations going on there. So they're going to do it until you stop them. So the only question is, how do you organize to stop it? And believe me, they don't mind you calling them names. They don't. I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but I'm saying they don't mind all kind of bad breath. They don't mind all of that. I mean, they prefer not to have it, and they'll filter out as much as they can. But it's like, I don't know if you ever played football, but if you're playing, if you have to cover any receivers as a linebacker or a cornerback or a safety, they always say when the receiver is coming out, you have to watch his hips. Don't watch his shoulders. Don't watch his head, because he got all kind of head fake. Shoulders be going everywhere, but he's going where the hips are going, right? And so we have to be that way. We have to watch their hips, not what they're saying, not what they're talking about, not their fake outrage. We have a tendency to insult them and do all of these things and then watch them respond to our insults. And it looks like we upset them or hurt their feelings or piqued their card and all the rest of that. We go back with this sense of false satisfaction that we did something. They ain't done a damn thing, because they're looking and saying, what are their hips doing? And if all we're doing is talking about it and we're not building it, and we're not putting the people in place to resist the status quo and to insulate ourselves from the deleterious effects of their plans, then we're in big trouble. And they let you, and they'll even promote people unbeknownst to you. And I'm not going to mention some names, but I've heard one or two that I'm a little bit concerned about, that at the end of the day aren't going to get right down to the crux of the matter. The crux of the matter, are you telling your children today that they are not supposed to get screwed tomorrow? Not because it's wrong, although that's fine, but we just think those type of people. You just can't do that here. You can't do that to us. We Africans, we started this game. You're going to come run it on us? We're not going to let it happen. But if our children don't know that, we don't have that confidence, we don't have that thing, then they're going to run the game. So that's up to us. That's our responsibility, and we can do it anywhere in the world. I did want to get back for a second, if and we can recover this, but now that it's crossed my mind again, about this ADOS, fundamental Black African, all of this stuff that's swirling around.
Oh, the foundational African Aboriginal stuff.
Yeah, okay. Foundational. So I've tried to listen to some of this, as critically as I can, and this is extremely silly. And I hope that people are pissed off with me and take offense to what I'm saying and ignore me or lambaste me, whatever they do. This is silly. We got to think more deep than this. Now, let's get this right. Part of the problem, part of the reason all of this came up in the first place is because Black folk in the U.S. are talking about who is supposed to get reparations, right? I mean, reparations is at the core of a lot of this, right? When we get this money, who's supposed to get it? Oh, wait a minute. Your grandmother was from Barbados, and she came over with the... let me look at the formula. I don't think y'all part of this. Don't put your hand in that reparations pot, because go back to England where they enslaved you in Barbados or whatever it is. Get your money from them. We got all of this kind of stuff going on. And I'm listening to this discussion, and I said, and then we're in all kinds of conflict with other groups of African people around the world about, were they in America working to build this and so in the reparations. I understand the logic completely. The logic almost sounds like it makes sense until you really take a step back and say, what the hell are you talking about? I'm going to go into this level of conflict with another African, right, who was probably brought over on the same damn slave ship, dropped off in Barbados, dropped off in Jamaica, and I was dropped off in Florida, and it might have been the same damn family, right? Now, these years later, I got my guard up against him. I'm insulting, criticizing, ready to fight him and disassociate myself with him. All of these things because somebody might break us off a little something somewhere. I mean, is this a serious argument? And then when you look at the amount that if they did in California somewhere through some point, I mean, that's not one gold mine in Ghana. You know what I mean? That's not one uranium mine. That's not a tenth of a uranium mine in Niger. So you got literally trillions of dollars going through your hands as African people that you are not keeping and controlling on this African continent that we should be thinking day and night all across the Black world how to make sure that we control so we can do the things we talked about, added value, the process, and all of these things. If we're even going to give the resources out, that should be up to us too, by the way. But anyway, all of this thing, and now you're waiting for, did Gavin Newsom say he was gonna, or who did say, wait a minute, what? This Nigerian guy, he thinks wait a minute. What the hell are you talking about? The guy in Nigeria who's arguing with you about reparations, you're arguing with him whether or not he's got more oil in Nigeria. They got enough stuff to keep all y'all running on high for the next 1,000 years. Mm-hmm. If you organize yourself to go get it. But you're going to ignore all of that because that's where the fight is, right? Because they're going to try to kill you if you try to keep your own stuff. And you're going to get in a big fight with somebody about what percentage, if any, of this are you supposed to get when they break us off, if they do. I mean, I can't imagine another more useless waste of time than that discussion. And you know what that comes down to? And some of the people who are talking about it and other things they do, I actually like. The brother did good here, the sister did good there. I agree with some of their other analysis. But when it comes down to this one, they've completely lost track of where the money is. They've lost track of where the value is. They've lost track of, So
that's what I'm trying to say. The gold is in California. We're not running towards the gold rush.
You know what? And a lot of this just comes down to plain old fear. Plain old fear. Because to keep the big money, you're gonna have to fight like hell. To argue with the Nigerian or a Jamaican over the small money you might get, you ain't got to do nothing. You're not going to be in any trouble. There's no danger in that. If I was white, I would look at you and say, you guys argue about this all day long. And then if we decide to give you some, by the way, we got $100-something trillion in debt we got to take care of. But yeah, we can find out how to take some of that and give it to you. But even if, you know what I mean, which they're not. But even if they were, the amount they give you is just a fraction of what you're supposed to be in control of. What about that? And that's not part of the argument. So to me, I can't take all of that seriously, although I understand the logic and I even understand the emotional appeal to it. Yes, sir. You were going to say.
I'm just saying that history has proven that the United States of America has no intention of paying its debt to those of us who are descended from those who were brought over on ships and those of us who may have already been here. They've proven that they have no intention of paying that debt. So for us to argue about how much we should get and when we should get it, it's a fruitless argument. John Conyers' bill sat on a table for not just a couple years, for decades. And they virtually killed it. They let a pandemic come along and say, well, this is a crisis that we need to address. But the crisis of Black America has been in effect since day one. And they're not going to admit that they were wrong. They are not going to admit that they owe us. So what are we wasting our time arguing about?
But I think one of our real questions is we don't really have any geopolitical outlook on these things. Look, if you owe all of these trillions of dollars to the rest of the world, right, which you, by the way, do not intend to pay, and one way to make sure that you don't pay it or can't pay it is to go to war with the people you owe it to, right, and say, well, sorry, you lost this, you lost that. We canceling that debt. We got to keep the dollar strong so we can keep charging against the dollar as the reserve currency, no matter how much debt we go into. And if the thing finally implodes, you think we're going to try to find the money to pay y'all back? Of course not. Now, these people willing to go to war around the world to keep from paying debts that they owe, that they are only able to accrue because of their power and the power of the dollar, which was the power of America. Now, these same people who are going to renege on all of that are going to turn around and give you something worthwhile. This is just, I think we just don't have any scope. And so a lot of the people who are making these arguments aren't paying attention to who the people they're talking to. That's one part of it. And you know what the other part is we still believe in these people. We still have Europhilia. We still believe in the goodness or the potential goodness of the master.
But hey,
and as
man,
long as that's deep into your subconscious, you tell yourself damn near anything. And that's what's going on right now. So to me, I don't care if people are angry at me because it's the dumbest thing. And if you have any idea of how the world works and how people work, it's just pure silliness. Now they said, well, so-and-so got reparations. Well, oh, by the way, did so-and-so also build up their nation? Japanese got reparations. Japanese got a nation that you got to deal with of some consequence. Do you?
Let me say this, man.
No. And so they, and even what they gave him, I'm sure the Japanese look at that and say, that's just chump change based on how many Toyotas we sold last year. This is a bunch of silliness. What are we talking about here? We don't do the numbers, we don't think it through and say, what is the scope of the argument we're talking about? This is just dumb. And how much energy it's eating and how much animosity it's creating. I mean, the whole thing is just preposterous.
It is. Let me say this here. And it goes back to, something me and Quad David Whitaker said, and you kind of brought it up too, Jerry, in the beginning about, don't take offense, but we're suffering from mental illness.
Oh, we're crazy.
You say we're crazy. We suffer from mental illness because here, take this little analogy. This is what I've been speaking of lately. Here it is, black folks, and keep us on the three events. Black folks, we sit up here and get mad at our neighbor for running on your grass or something that, he sold you some bad products in the store. You won't never patronize the store again. You won't talk to your neighbor again. You mad. But here we are. You dealing with a person that has persecuted you for 400 years. Now, this is the mentality that you did, because like Dr. Amos Wilson said, you're looking for him to have some type of epiphany coming to Jesus moment that he's going to change and everything is going to be all right. So I'm going to stay on this ship right here called America, and I know he's going to come around one day. But you're dealing with a person or people that you have. What have you done for this country? You have fought in every war that we don't conflict with violence, with great, forward progress there. You don't lost hundreds of thousands of lives in this country. You've been persecuted. You've been raped. Okay, you've been discriminated against for 400 years, all the way through it. You don't separated families and babies and cut babies out of womb. Women and men has been hung. You know what I'm saying? You still been fighting for civil rights all these years. You got some people don't want to deal with Africa because I don't know what country I come from. You had to deal with all that psychos that went down with the separation of family, of laying down with your own mothers and being a breeder and buck busting and all this stuff that you had to deal with all the way through, all the losses. And this man still want to fight with you on reparations. I'm just saying this to the people who still hoping for some come to Jesus moment that's going to happen in this country. I'm saying to you, evaluate what type of person are you dealing with, and stole all your inventions, and you don't built up this country 250 years of free labor, and you ain't worth something. You don't die for it, and you don't. And I'm just laying out. You're beating a dead horse. Go ahead. I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
No, well, what and what you're saying is that it doesn't make any sense, right?
It
doesn't make any sense. So then you have to ask yourself, what's going on in the minds of people who can see something this obvious and still come up with a conclusion like they're gonna give you something?
Yeah.
What's going on in that person's mind, right? And what's going on in that person's mind is the thought that he or she doesn't have options. So when you conclude in your own mind that you don't have options other than to get a better deal out of the person you think is superior to you, then you're going to start making craziness. You're going to ignore all of that history you just talked about and pretend the person's going to change. Well, deep in your heart, you know the man's not going to change. You know it, but you can't accept it. Why can't you accept it? Because you don't think you have any options. Now, how do you get to a point in your head collectively that you think and know you have options? I'm not even talking about just moving to Africa or whatever. I just mean options in terms of building power in the world. So how do you get to that point? So once you are at that point, then you can look at all of that history very logically with a cool head and say, this doesn't make any sense to reach these conclusions based on this historical evidence and what's gone on. So let me make sense, look at it clearly, and then choose to do something else, right? But if you are not confident in your ability to choose to do something else, then you're just going to keep wrestling with, his behavior. And after this point, I've proven, I don't know how many times Black folks have proven over and over again in so many myriad of different ways, everything you said, and why, by the way, you are owed reparations, just to be clear about it, you are owed. But you know how I say you get them? You build your own power to where you can control your things, which means you're going to have to fight. And once you get your own power, then you go back to anybody you want to go back to, the Europeans, the Euro-Americans and all, and say, you know what? Wow, man, we did some calculations just back of the envelope. Turns out that you owe us $321 trillion. Now, that's because we cut the interest payments. But since, we're trying to create a new future and a new world, and we're reasonable people with power, we just going to cut it to 150 trillion. We just going to call it a day. Okay? So here's how we going to collect. You know what I mean? And if you got the power, then you start collecting. But if you're not building power, you're not even imagining that you will ever have power, then you're going to get totally consumed in the minutia of the argument, demonstrating him over and over again ad infinitum, beyond, any doubt that you're owed all of these things that you never have the power to pay. So let's build power, and then we'll tell them what they owe us. You see, but we don't want to do that because it takes work, takes time, and it's extremely dangerous, by the way, because as I said, their projections include owning everything you got. So,
well, we could tell them no more coltan, no more microchips, and your empire comes crashing down because you can't get what you need to facilitate your agenda. That's where the real power is.
Well, no, wait a minute. But when you tell them that, right, their response to that is, you and what army? You don't have no response. You ass out. You see, this is the problem. You can tell them that, and what are you going to say? Oh, shoot, you caught us. You're right. Damn it. Hey, take it. You keep your stuff, and we just going to get raggedy for the next 50 years.
We're going to get you paid.
Close down all of our technology. Right. Shops and all of our,
right. But then again,
that big,
the resources for their weapons come from where? See, that's one. Number two, we got more people than they have. They can't even have a future without us because their birth rates are declining, and they understand that. That's why you seeing all this miscegenation right now. Because they're in survival mode. They cannot continue to exist without us. And we don't understand the power that we have when we stand up.
Well, once again, let's be clear about what you're saying. You have to talk about what standing up means. Right now, if they look and they see their future in jeopardy, mainly through China and other places, but they see their hegemony, their power in jeopardy, and then they look at Black folks, Africa, and whatever resources we have, physical, mineral, or human, they're going to look at those resources and say, we need them to stay on top. And then we say, well, wait a minute. You don't understand the power we have. We're not going to give those to you because that's not where the game ends. That's where the game starts. And that's when they come and say, well, wow, that's very interesting, Mr. Robinson. Is it? Where's that hypersonic missile you've been working on? Oh, you haven't? Well, shoot. Let's see. bam, what's that noise, right? So you got. Now I'm not saying everything is strictly military, but they right now they can even do it a different way and just say, we're getting ready to cut off all trade in the thing that you have been using to survive. Or we can, there's a whole lot of tools at their disposal when you are weak. So there's no shortcuts to building power. You got to put your people in the pipeline for generations. And then even when they're coming out of the pipeline, the battles and victories they're going to be winning are even going to be a little scattershot and piecemeal in the beginning. And it's going to take time. And then in the meantime, everybody, as I mentioned earlier, not just the European American, but everybody is going to conspire against that because they are all planning to use your resources for their future development and hegemony. So you really in a deep. Sometimes I think Black folks don't know the trouble we're in. Good news, as I started to say last time, we don't know the trouble we're in, but we also don't know the potential we have. And I mean human potential we really have. It's unbelievable. And your enemy knows it. And he's looking there saying, okay, the only way we can control all of these resources and keep their resources on our books for future projections, the only way we can successfully do that is to keep their minds upside down. Only way we can, because if they ever decide we just think the type of people that you can run that game on, we're all in trouble. Because that means now we got to attack them, we got to do this, we got to do that. But if they collectively are thinking that way, there's nothing short of just nuclear annihilation you can do to stop those people from coming back up the curve and getting what belongs to them. You just can't stop them. Two reasons. Number one, you can't stop them because the determined people just are very difficult to stop. But number two, African people are the first human beings on this earth, brother. We're the parents of all humanity. We got more, whatever it is, than anybody's got. And all you got to do is look at our children. Look at our children. You go to. I was looking at this guy, what is his name? Travis Scott or something. He's a rapper or something. And I was looking and I was seeing that this kid goes to some place in Rio or in Sao Paulo, 110,000 people. You know what I mean? I mean, all of these people hanging on their every word. Look at Rema and Burna Boy and all of this. And even the whites or the Koreans who are popular, if you watch them, they're just rough, they're just a rough imitation of what our original thing is. They're just the Elvis Presleys of the day, right? And they're popular because they do a mediocre job of imitating what we do naturally. So it's not just rhythm and blues, and it's not singing and dancing and playing ball. It's everything. We are African people, and there's no one superior to us or even close. But we're the only ones who don't know that, and we don't operate under that assumption because crazy. We're brainwashed, socialized into thinking that we're second rate. That's why I say the potential of our children, who are going to be the major cohort in the future, is just unbelievable. I mean, you can't even imagine the potential of conscious African youth. They can say to the rest of the youth of the world, we want you to do A, B, C, G, and B, and Z. You understand? And we're half of the population of the world in that cohort. And we have all the major influence. The rest of the world's young people find African people irresistible. You realize that?
Yeah, I've heard that.
Irresistible. What do you just listen to music around the world. Listen to K-pop. All K-pop is the Elvis Presley version of, our stuff. It ain't nothing. I listen to it. I'm like, where everybody screaming about this? I mean, this is black kids making this noise. We'd be like, y'all need to go practice. But since they're doing it, it's all the rage, right? So, but the point I'm mentioning is other youth find our youth irresistible. Now you have irresistible, and they follow and they watch and they listen. Now these youth are conscious, what we're calling conscious. Not only can they save themselves, they can save the world.
Absolutely, because nobody, don't live forever. I say they don't. Nobody lives forever, so you're gonna have a different generation on, and that's why it's important for us, like you said, to work with those children and have a few of those type of generations come up. And what I think, Vincent, you may agree, and those who may be listening out there, you know, I think one of the things that caused this gap between us, or which we was talking about before, a lot of us don't have a clue about African history. I mean, some of the things with what colonization has done to Africa and the mindset of us. We don't. Okay, most of our history deals with African American history. The Malcolm X's, maybe the Marcus Garveys and Medgar Evers and Martin Luther's and things like that. But we don't have a clue. I think if we had a clue, if that history was taught along with African history and freedom fighters that was over in Africa and the things that was done, and them knowing, because we know a little bit about the conspiracy that has been placed on people like Medgar and Malcolm and Martin and things like that. If we see the parody of what happened over with Steve Biko and Patrice and all these guys, then that would start us thinking to the point of, okay, this same game has been played on both sides of us, and it's causing this, and that would make our kids see the game is being make it more clear, the game that's being played and the assault that's being played on African people around the world, and that might bring us a little bit together. Because something that I wrote, we almost tend to think that when we was going through our hardships over here and slavery over here, the Africans was at the beach having a good time. Some of us, because we're oblivious to that.
Yeah, that's another issue. People come over and they want to talk about who sold them into slavery and on and on and on. And, to me, I look at that and I say, look, I don't want to make any particular judgments at this point about it, because if you are in a place and they're coming for your group, your clan, your family, right, and they have the capacity and the power to get them, especially if you have no idea how they think and work and operate, because you don't really know how evil can be. That's part of it, some naivete on our part of who we were dealing with. But let's just say you're in a clan on the west coast of Africa, and these people come up and all of this. Now, you've been in civil wars, small wars with other clans, other groups, other nations, and you maybe have some people, and these people are like, okay, we getting ready to fill this ship up over here. And you see these arms and everything we got here that we have already demonstrated to you are superior to what you're holding at this particular point in time. These arms are going to guarantee that ship, when it takes off, is going to be full. Now, who's going? Now, all of us today are saying, oh, what I would have stood up and say, nobody black is going. Wait a minute, hold it. Are you sure? Especially if you don't know the people and have no idea the level of sinister death and destruction that they can, and exploitation that they can. You're holding prisoners. So it's like, okay, my clan is going, or elders from my clan, or young people, my wife, and all the rest of it going, or these prisoners of this small, conflict we had, these 25 are going. I might, in an enlightened moment, look and say, oh, no, nobody goes. But I can also look and say, if somebody got to go, it's not going to be me. Okay, I mean, there's a human nature. It ain't going to be me and mine. Now, this idea of Africa, who's African, that wasn't a thing. You're somewhere in Cape Coast in Ghana, and you're Fanti. You don't even know what the Mandinka or the Moshi or the Hausa. These people you never even heard of half the time. And if somehow they are brought down through your place, I mean, what allegiance do you have to them as quote unquote Africans? So it's easy to look back, hindsight 2020, and pretend we would all have brought all this Pan-African knowledge and solidarity and bravery and all of that stuff. And I'm saying, well, not saying that you wouldn't, but you're not demonstrating right now with all of the knowledge you have of what happened in history. You're not taking remedy today. Now you know what you've been through. And you still don't want to stand up and say no.
Mm-hmm.
So what makes me think you would have stood up and said no, back when you didn't even know who you were dealing with? Back when the threat was immediate to you and your family and your clan.
Mm-hmm.
And to get out of that, somebody else was going to go before you.
Mm-hmm.
And we all pretend we'd all stood up and just took the bullets to make sure this house, a guy who we never even heard of, their clan, their group, they go. I'm not sure all of them. Some of us may have had that foresight, bravery, and all that to do, I guess. And some did. You have to remember, people fought.
Mm-hmm.
People fought to keep their people from going. It's not like everybody just laid down and said, for sale Negroes. I mean, a lot of people fought to keep their people from going or their area from going. I mean, we have these examples in Senegal, other places, so I think we have to be a little more. But see, then you got to get to the bottom is why are these mutual accusations going on so strongly? Why? Oh, you sold us. Oh, you did this. Oh, yeah. Why is that? Part of that is what? When you're afraid to deal with the perpetrator of the crime, you're going to, because of their power, your fear is going to compel you to attack the person who is least able to hurt you. And that's the other Negro who hasn't built the nation. I mean, that's who it is. And so that's how we get all wound up in our underwear here. But this is, a lot of this is just pure fear. Pure fear. Wrapped up, I always say fear has 1,000 faces, and there's a whole lot of ways to pretend you're not afraid when you are afraid of the real danger. And the danger is the people who brought the danger in the first place. But if you know who you are, you know your capacity, then you start building. And once you know your capacity, you can start looking with a clear mind that, who are the enemies. And you do have enemies. Enemies are people who would exploit your people. Enemies are people who would pollute your land. We got Chinese down here. Everyone talks about, how China and Africa were. If you live here in Africa, all you got to do is go over to any one of the major rivers, several of them, and watch how they've been polluted by Chinese mining gold in the middle of the rivers. Some people can't even drink from rivers they've been dependent on for 1,000 years. You can't even fish there anymore. These are Chinese, and you can go see them. Now, what are you going to do about that? They're there. And he said, well, our big men let them do that. So what are you going to do about the big men? If the big men are letting them exploit you. And then the fear kicks in, and you go, well, there's nothing we can do. And the reason you accept that is because you don't even know who you are. And somewhere in your subconscious, you deserve that treatment because you're inferior people. Now, they can get that through curriculum. They can get that through the Bible. They can get that a whole lot of ways. And we get them in all of those different sources infused in our subconscious. And it dictates our behavior in the U.S. and in Africa. So we got to know we're crazy before we can start the deep crazy process. You know what I
mean? I wanted to I guess maybe take advantage of the fact that I'm speaking to someone who is in Ghana, who has boots on the ground and an awareness of certain political realities. Ghana recently elected a new president, someone who had been president before and has returned to that position. And I've been hearing allegations of fraud and other things that have happened within the government of Ghana. I'm just wondering what the political climate is now that there has been a change of leadership. And I also want to talk to you about inflation and how it's affecting Ghana.
Okay, let me ask you, when you say you're hearing about fraud and all of these things, you're saying of the current new administration or of the last administration?
The last administration. For instance, there was the cathedral that was supposed to be built, and now instead of a cathedral, they got a great big swimming pool that cost $25 million and doesn't make sense. So the current president is alleging that there was corruption and fraud in the previous administration, and it's something that he as a leader is going to have to deal with.
Actually, if the Western media, pay attention, if the Western media start saying that this guy is, doing all kinds of fraudulent things, and this guy, if they really start putting a bad breath on him, that means he's actually
It's doing something.
contemplating doing something useful with
Mm-hmm.
AES, which is Burkina, Mali, and Niger. So he's really on the hot seat because his people, and he's also a northerner, by the way, which means he's probably got blood relations with the people in Burkina. I think he's a Gonja, and they're kind of more on the Mali side. But the point is, those are more of his people genetically, blood-wise, history-wise, tradition-wise, and even the Akans and the Gas and the Ewe's in the south. But if you start here, and so he has some natural affinity toward that movement just north of him. If you start hearing some real bad stuff about him, that means he's starting to move in the correct direction toward the AES. If they start praising his name too high, that means he plans to continue the status quo. Now, remember, he's been president before, and nothing revolutionary happened, But, we're going to wait and see. There's some very clear things that he can do to show goodwill among the way, like facilitating the transport of things in and out of the ports of Ghana up into Burkina and Mali, because they're landlocked countries. So there are certain things you can say, as of today, your stuff can come in and out. And some people are saying he's starting to do, I don't know, I have to, you hear rumors, but you got to go down to the port and see the doggone thing coming in before you know whether or not, you know what I mean? But there's some certain things the brother could do, we're hoping he could do. He's making some noises, but the Senegalese were making noises. The Guineans are making noises. People are making noises. But the whites in power want everybody back into ECOWAS. ECOWAS was the West African Economic Organization that was supposed to be a benefit to us all throughout West Africa. Of course, it's been absolutely useless, and everyone knows it. Now they're trying to get someone with some gravitas, like the guy here who's taken over in Ghana, and some goodwill toward his people in the north, to hopefully bring those three countries back into ECOWAS and be as feckless as they used to be. It's not going to happen. The brothers that peeped that card, they ain't getting ready to go back on the plantation, not now, and probably not never. So now the question is going to be, how many people in ECOWAS, groups of people, and hopefully nations, are going to migrate and connect to them and start working with them? That's going to be where the rubber meets the road, because the pressure from the Americans, the French, the Brit, and everybody else to stay on that plantation is going to be unbelievable. And it was already unbelievable to the extent that they told the remaining people in ECOWAS to get your boots on, and you're going to attack Niger, putting in, our boy back in power who's letting us have the uranium for nothing. Well, ECOWAS, they all got to the table and said, yeah, we're going to go into Niger militarily in the time and place of our choosing. Talked all of that big Rambo talk. But the people in the countries, like Ghana, for instance, even the military, they didn't say it, but they're like, okay, let me get this right. We supposed to go to war with the brothers across the border, half of whom are our first cousins, because somebody in some foreign capital says we got to go die for that. And so it became apparent to the president of Nigeria and the president of Ghana and some of the others who were doing the biggest talking, past president, that there was absolutely no way they're going to get the population to go along with just a suicidal boondoggle. It wasn't going to happen. So they had to back off. Even though their bosses says, go sick them. They're like, hey, man, this suicide mission. And why would we do that anyway? But they don't say that. They just said, yes, sir, boss, but this suicide. So the boss backed off and said, okay, yeah, we admit it was a suicide mission. We just thought you might be stupid enough to try it. Okay, you didn't do it. Let's see. Now what is plan B? And plan B is maybe we can reabsorb some of that. That's not going to happen, right? So plan C, what is plan C? These are the plans for the people outside who want control of all the resources of West Africa. What's plan C? Well, plan C, I don't know what plan C is, but I think what plan C is
destabilize.
is violence.
Yeah, destabilize.
You ought to remember a book that came out a long time ago called Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Mm-hmm.
That one.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about, they do certain things internally, maybe they foment coups, they do all these things. And at some point, if that looks like it's not going to work out, they send in what they call the jackals. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
The jackals are the people
Mm-hmm.
from outside who come in and have to start taking matters in their own hands. We're talking assassinations, we're talking other, mercenary-led coups, all of these kind of things. All of that is in the toolbox. You see, and this gets back to our fear. Because, we'd be looking at this going, damn, boy, this is getting ready to get rough. But that only paralyzes people who don't know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. And you can look and say it's getting ready to get rough, but we rough. Mm-hmm. So it's time to get down because we keeping our shit. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we hadn't socialized at that point yet. So we're like, yeah, it's getting rough. Well, maybe we need to go on and give up the fun. But I think the brothers up there, let's hope they have crossed the Rubicon and they're just not coming back. But be prepared to see a whole lot of people get smashed in the process. Because like I said, their spreadsheets are showing Africa resources from the next 100 years. And these people are talking about keeping it. Right there in Niger, for instance, I forget the numbers, but it was something that affected a kilogram of uranium.
80 cents.
It was selling for something like $8.
80 cents.
80 cents or something like that. Yeah. And you imagine these French have been getting the kilogram, and the market value is $300-something a kilogram, almost $400. They're getting this for, I don't know, 8 cents or 80 cents, doesn't really matter.
80 cents. Mm-hmm.
But imagine 80 cents for how many decades they've been getting this uranium, powering their own cities and all around France, exporting power to neighboring cities, selling excess, you know what I mean? Uranium on the open market, making all of that money. Niger, which was, I think, the poorest country or the second poorest country in Africa, cut that off and said, we want market value. Now they're like one of the fastest growing countries in the world. Mm-hmm. Just that quick, just on that one resource. Yeah. Now multiply that by all of the other hundreds of very, very expensive and necessary resources, coltan, cobalt, all the way across it, So now, if you, the man in charge, quote unquote, the man from France or whatever it is, as we used to call him, and you're looking at this loss, this hit that France just took with this one resource, with this one country, you're going, damn. Okay. Next thing you know, so-and-so is going to be trying to do the same thing with, cobalt. Somebody over here said, well, it's time to keep the phosphorus, baby. And somebody else said, gold, what'd you say? We keeping that, and I mean all the way down the line. Mm-hmm. So what we need to be concerned about now is the smashing of an example. In other words, make an example out of them, crush them, destroy them, make their economy dysfunctional, drone them, bomb them, whatever the hell you got to do to take control of that situation, and most importantly, to intimidate everybody else to say, man, we don't even want to try it. Because look what happened to AES. Look what happened in Niger. Look how they, and so that is going to be what's coming down the pipe. Now, the question is how much fear, how much determination, how much self-knowledge, self-love are we going to deploy? Are we going to be able to deploy in our defense? That's the whole question. Right. And I don't know to what extent that's been built ground up in those countries. I really can't tell you.
Right. You know what, Jerry, again, and this is what I've been saying to people here in America, that is definitely something that we need to be aware of when you see it coming down the pipe. Don't be just saying, oh, they're those Africans doing this again. There's some instability going on. They just can't get it together. We need to understand, and listen to me, listener. You need to understand that they're not going to lay down and let their rental property go. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be some pushback. And
Yeah,
so when you see it come, understand why it's happening, not just point the finger and say they can't never get it together over here, this instability. And then also a footnote that I just ran across, I didn't know nothing about, that brother Traore, he set up a defense ministry, and he's starting to make his own weapons there, okay, in Burkina Faso. And so the documentary went on to, or the interview went on to state that, which I thought was interesting, that I believe it was in the 40s, 1940s, 50s, or something to that nature, that 50 African countries signed an agreement to never make their own weapons. And just like
well,
America do around the country, around the world, we'll protect you. Don't build up no nuclear or something like that, so they can easily smack you in the mouth and tell you to go sit in the corner.
well, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure about all 50 nations, but But one thing we know for sure: part of when the French left their African colonies and put in this crazy deal that the African colonies would use their CFA, their currency. The African colonies would keep their reserves in French banks, and African colonies would always give the French first right of refusal for anything, and African colonies would depend on France for their defense. And a lot of them signed up to that because even though we were coming out of the colonial era, we weren't coming out of the era with strength. We were just getting out, you know what I mean? And so they said, look, we still want to maintain control because at the end, we still have the military power to just pummel you, and we still have the economic power to choke you. So you want to be independent, but don't cross us. And that started in roughly 60. I mean, yeah, a lot of the French colonies, some of them started getting their independence in, say, 50. Ghana was in 57. So from, let's call it 1960 to 2025, that's what, 40, 65 years? Or let's say 2020, when these guys really start pulling. So for that 60 years, that has been the arrangement, right? And now is just the first time that people are trying to pull out of that and go, you know what? We need to stop using your currency. You know what? We need to get rid of your language. We need to stop giving you right of first refusal on all acquisitions and all contracts and all the rest of that. You know what? We don't want to depend on you anymore for weapons. We're going to say so. For 60 years, that has been the arrangement, and they're just now coming out of it. So now, if you are France in this case, but Europe in general, or outsiders in general, you getting ready to go through some withdrawal symptoms because you've been getting the good stuff cheap for a long time. You don't want to give it up.
Since you mentioned currency, I wanted to get to the second part of the question, and that was the invisible tax of inflation. One of the ways that populations are controlled is by that number that they give us every month. It's 2%, it's 3%, whatever. One of the things that I was hearing about the current state of affairs in Ghana is that within the past couple years, you've been experiencing something like 20% inflation in the country. And I was curious about how that affects you as someone who had economic advantage because your income goes farther than the income of typical Ghanaians. But I'm just wondering how you are navigating this high inflation in the country, and I guess perhaps just curious about someone who was considering a move to Ghana, how they would be able to exist in light of the fact that you have inflation at the rate that it is, and they may have the limits of the resources that they are bringing over there.
I don't think it's going to affect them that much. I mean, look, let's see. buy a crate of eggs here. I think there's 24 eggs. Was it 24 eggs? Maybe 24, 30 eggs, something like that. And it's going to be a few bucks. They tell me over there, you buy 12 eggs and it's some astronomical number, So for people in the U.S. to be talking about inflation in Africa, I find to be like really strange. So your money is going to go further in either way, as long as you have some kind of money coming in. But I tell you the truth. So just to finish that, yeah, we see inflation. I actually don't run the bit, Antonio will tell you, I don't really run the business. I spend more time, talking with the young people and dealing with the Ancestral and all of that. So she's buying the food, and I always hear her complaining of inflation. But the people are still going, still making it, still managing okay. So as far as people coming from outside the U.S., what you're watching, in addition to the inflation, is the exchange rate to the dollar. Because of the dollar goes, the local currency here, the CD gets weaker, then your dollar goes further. So some of the inflation that you experience is also offset by the fact that your dollar is going further. So now if you're on the Ghana side, then it's the flip. It's worse because the inflation is going up and your money's buying less against the dollar at least. And so, boy, it's tough. But once again, I think if I were advising, which I got to talk to my own family, people that I love and care about in the U.S., the younger people. The older people with a couple of retirements and all of that, I don't have a couple of retirements, but the people, because I left before I was retired from anywhere. But for the people who have a couple of retirements and, they got $5,000, $8,000 or whatever, six coming in every month, no matter what. And they're retired and they're 60, 70, 80, whatever it is, they're going to live fine. I mean, they're going to... I was just showing some. There was a sister. She's retired. I just went by her place. She's got a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom place. She's got it decorated real nice inside across somewhere. And she's paying $2,000 per year. Okay. And I was sending that video to somebody just the other day, and they're like, per month or per year? I said, no, that's per year. So if you're, if you're retired and you're getting, and you don't have a whole lot of encumbrances now. If you got a bunch of bills in the U.S. you got to pay. But let's just say that's pretty much straight money. $4,000 for a year. I mean, you got some serious digs. You know what I mean? And that might just be 1 month's check. What you going to do with the rest of it? So for retirees, that's one thing. But now if you don't have money and you're 33 years old, 35, you got 2 kids and they're, 4 and 7. And and you and your wife, and you come over, you better have a plan. Some, like I said earlier in the last part, some people are making money online doing different things. Some people are starting to farm. People are doing different things to survive. Some people are into real estate in the U.S. and when they sell something, they take those proceeds and put something down here and start building up that way. So everybody has different ways of making money, but you're not going to come here and find a job that's paying you the kind of money to live the way you want to live. But even that's even that doesn't really tell the story, because let's say you came with you and your family, and you're 35, and you got $25,000. $25,000 can go pretty fast, but if you come with $25,000 and you tell the guy who's doing that $2,000 a year thing, let's say $3,000, because you got 2 kids, you want a little more room, $3,000. Now you say, look, bruh, I want this thing for the next 5 years. Here's $15,000, 5 years. So you cover it with your rent in a decent place for the next 5 years for $15,000. Now you got 25. Now you got another 10,000. Now that you can go through that fast. Now, don't get me wrong, but housing is not necessarily going to be your issue. So when housing is not your issue, you still got to pay school fees, but you can put them in local schools. The fees are very moderate, but you better still have a plan of what you're going to do with that extra 10 or 15,000. How are you going to build that? But the point is, you see what I'm saying? It's still quite livable if you get the housing out of the way.
You know what I say too. You know what I say too, Jerry. And for somebody who may have some capital built up like that, I would say, look at, come survey the area, and there may be some existing businesses that you can partner up with that just capital poor and expand on whatever it is that they doing, to help generate some money. That's what some of the young folks can do. And
other Ghanaian businesses?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now the thing there is serious due diligence, because a lot of people, of course, and I'm sure you've heard this before, when you show up from the U.S. With your wallet and your check, some of these people look at you and go, I knew my angel has arrived.
Yeah.
They have you investing in their business with very little intent on letting you cash in on the other end. So you really have to do due diligence on that one. I would tell people in that particular case, don't do anything right away if you can last a while. And then when you do something, you ever heard the business people say, fail quick? In other words, you get an amount of money that you can afford to lose. We don't really feel like we can afford to lose anything, but that if you lose it, it's not going to just, destroy you.
Right.
And then, try the thing that you have in mind, because what you will learn in the process will be invaluable. Then the next time around, when you want to do something maybe a little more substantial and actually put a little bit more capital in it, then, you have a much better chance of the thing working. I mean, that's anywhere, but here is the added problem, if you will, of, not really knowing the people in the culture. And like I said, some people think you just flew in to save them. And there is corruption. There's a lot of different things, but every country is different. And so I don't know, but I really think young people, if they can get the land and get them some land and get them a reasonably nice place to stay, and don't crowd around Accra. I think that's one of the problems too. People are all trying to be around Accra. I tell people, a lot of people, go all the way to the Togo border and come back that way. Learn yourself 10 words of French, and things are cheaper and easier, and the beaches are cleaner and everything else. And if you need a little city life, run into Togo and do it. You got to be flexible, and you got to have some, you have to. That's why you should come, look, listen, feel around before you jump in any big investment or any big commitment of any sort, social or economic. Yeah. But it's all about the will. And as we talked the other day, I always push the mission. What is your mission? Are you coming to Africa because you think your money can stretch? Well, it may stretch, but you still may not be all that happy because something else that you were hoping and expecting. If you're older and you're coming with your retirements and you just want to chill, then you're probably gonna be all right. You see different things happening, whether it's some corruption or some bad infrastructure or, all of these different things. But, with your retirement and where you're living and your lifestyle, it's not going to be a deal breaker for you. And then you can enjoy all of the good other cheap things and the fun and the culture and this, that, and the other, and just relax. And that's what a lot of people are doing. But I'm talking about the younger people, because older people, a lot of times, even the conscious ones and all that, by the time they get here and they 60 and 70, they're like, man, I done what I'm going to do. You know what I mean? And they They just chill. They may help kick him
set
here
on
and
out
there.
the pasture, huh?
They ain't really trying to work, you know what I mean?
Right, right.
Unless they really deeply committed. But the younger kids, I mean, the younger people, they're the ones that really have to be creative and really getting back to the mission. The stronger their mission is in terms of, say, Garveyism, Pan-Africanism, African sovereignty and power, independence, all those types of almost kind of intangibles. But the deeper but it's not really intangible, because if you do that and get in control of your resources, you're going to enjoy the tangible things too. But in the beginning, it's going to seem like almost like idealistic, quixotic, and you know, fantasy. But that's the things you got to do. You have to have some imagination and some mission. So I'm pushing everyone, get that mission clear in your head, and that will help you make it through some of the difficulties.
Well, Jerry, we appreciate you taking time out your busy schedule to sit down with us and have a good chat. Every time I sit down with you, I have a good conversation with you, sharing information and pressing you with questioning that we usually get from folks over here in America, and clearing up some of that stuff. So it's always good to talk to somebody who's actually living there and amongst the people. And I think Vince kind of alluded earlier that, like you just said, some of us may come in and to just be put out the pasture and chill and actually separate ourselves from the people there and the culture there, So I don't know if that, depends on what your mission is, if that's the right thing to do or not. But
I think, let me say one thing to that. I think that's really overstated. I think most of the people who come here, and I hear that a lot, but most of the people who come here, they're not really separating themselves from the Ghanaians. And you can't point to a place that, there's the African American community. We don't, where all African Americans are living together or something. There's no such thing like that anywhere in Ghana. There's some people in Cape Coast, because it's not that big of a place. It's not that big of a place. So, you're going to, but even then, the people in Cape Coast aren't like living in, adjacent compounds or something.
Right.
I think that I hear that, and that's turning into like a urban legend, man. But you know what I mean? But in reality, I don't see us separating ourselves. Half of them are marrying somebody from here, or I think the integration process is going better than people give it credit for. Somebody's always looking for the bad news, because they want to put that online and discourage people from, trying it and doing it. So, they're, separating themselves. And somebody was saying, the price of living has gone up fourfold because people are coming from America, running the prices up, and I'm hearing this kind of stuff. And I said, this is complete nonsense. I mean, we're, what I'm saying? How few thousand of us are going to come into a country of 35 million with our little retirements and our little social security check, and we're going to quadruple the price of things in Ghana. Just think about the numbers. It doesn't make sense. And what that does is it takes people's minds off the fact that the people who really robbing you and who really are doing all of these things and are bringing in heavy money and are running the prices up. Part of the reason they're running the prices up because they own the businesses they're charging you. So I think we need to look at some of these other groups who are coming in higher numbers than us, definitely bringing a lot more money and investment than us, because they're bringing it from nations they control. And I think we need to be looking at them more in terms of, inflation and, being the culprits of running up prices. And African American people come from the U.S. I know we just ain't bringing that kind of juice, man. We're not bringing that kind of money. It's going to impact this thing to where the average guy now can't afford rent. This is complete nonsense. But these things get currency. Why? Because they feed into people who watch the internet who don't want to be involved with Africa. So if you watch some of these things, if two people do a YouTube interview or YouTube thing, and one puts up, Africa has been good, worked out well for me or something like that. And then somebody else puts one is like, the reason I got the hell out of Ghana, right? The one that says the reason I got the hell out of Ghana is going to get a 50 times as many hits. Why? Because it's feeding into what people already want to see, which is I want to go to Africa, So we can't believe all of that.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, Jerry, again, we appreciate you taking the time, and I don't know if is it the website you have or something where people can check out.
If you really want to see a lot of the things, you can just go to just about any YouTube place. People are always complaining that we don't have a website and all that. My wife she's got Facebook and she interacts and all of that, but I've been promising the website forever, bro. Haven't done it. But we are doing some building down here, and hopefully the next time we can show you some of the things that we are. Library, multi-purpose center, and these kind of things.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I like your spot, Jerry. You kind of gave me some ideas of something similar that I would want to do. I mean, as far as just the layout and the amount of land that you have and what you're doing. So again, to listeners out there, go to the internet, YouTube, check them out, and if you happen to go to Ghana, definitely take your time to go visit the Ancestral Wall. It's in Pram Pram. Okay, so you can tell your guide or whoever you're traveling with where you're trying to go, to the African Ancestral Wall in Pram Pram, and you can get a chance to meet Jerry and go to his restaurant right there on the spot there and eat some good food and have some good
guest rooms too.
Huh?
I said we got guest rooms too.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can stay right on the premises there. The guest rooms there, as well. So come out and check my brother out. So as you can see with the interview, very knowledgeable brother. And he can share some things with you and put you in the right direction or some things you need to do if you're considering and thinking about making a move to Ghana. That's what we need to do is really go over there and sit with some of the people who are there in those communities so we can educate ourselves on how to maneuver and engulf ourselves into the culture and how to make that situation work out for you, because I'm a truly believer of African is at least a part of our future as African American people. Any closing remarks, Vince, before we roll?
I just wanted to ask, where is Pram Pram in relation to Accra?
It's about an hour. Well, traffic can get bad, but let's say an hour east up the coast.
Okay. All right. Good to know, and glad to hear that you have a guest house. It's one of the options that I might explore on my next visit, because I definitely want to take in the Ancestral Wall and also get an opportunity to meet you in person. So thank you for joining us today on the program. And I'm sure there was something in there for those who were listening and watching to take away from that can improve and enhance the quality of their outlook on our future. So again, thank you for joining us, Jerry.
Thank you for having me. And you brothers keep pushing here.
Yes, sir. Good too, man. I see you on the next go round, Jerry.
All right now.
Okay.
And to those of you who have watched us here on our YouTube channels, respectively, as always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make today your absolute best day. Peace, y'all.
Peace.
Howard.
All right. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
All right.